Good morning, everybody. Good to be back here on our daily meditations. I'm Caroline. I'm one of the team at Sangha Live. And it's great to be back here with Kyra Jewel Lingo for the next couple of weeks. And I know a lot of you really enjoyed Martin's sessions last week. And I know many of you will also be pleased to see Kyra Jewel back this week and next week. So it's really good to be here again, and it's really lovely to see you all logging in and saying hello in the sidebar there and saying where you're all joining us from. So welcome everybody, and a special welcome to you if this is your first time joining us today. The format will be the same as ever. We're here for an hour. The opportunity for some reflection at the beginning of the session. Then we'll be going into a guided meditation, and then the last 10 or 15 minutes or so is an opportunity for you to ask questions. The good news is that we've managed to fix some of the tech issues that we've been having for the last couple of months, bringing people on screen. So I know this hasn't been such an issue in these sessions, but some of our other sessions have been consistently bugged by this problem. So we're really happy that we've got to the bottom of it. So if you'd like to come on screen, we can really encourage you to do that now, because we know that hopefully we'll be able to bring you on. So if you want to ask a question face to face, it will look much like this with you and Kyra Jewel both on screen together. Just type a message in the sidebar there and I can bring you on. I'll just invite you on screen and you click the accept button and it will bring you on. The other way to ask a question, if you prefer to put it in writing, you can do that also. Just pop it in the ask a question box. If you click on ask a question under the video there, it will bring up a little pop-up box and you can put your question in there, and Kyra Jewel will see those coming up and can answer those for you. And then the other thing to mention is Dana or donations. These sessions are free to join, and they've been free to join throughout the lockdown period, but unfortunately they're not free to run. We have many ongoing costs that we need to meet. This platform, we need to pay for every session that we run. We need to pay for our web hosting, cost of software we use to send emails to you, various other costs that are to do with running a business, which are ongoing and quite substantial, and we don't get money from anywhere except from you guys. Basically, we depend on your contributions to keep these going. So if you value these sessions and you'd like us to keep doing them and you're able to contribute, we'd be really grateful if you could give something, whether it's a large amount or a small amount. Just click on the Dana button underneath the screen. It's very easy and straightforward to give. Likewise, if you're not able to give anything, please know that you are very welcome to attend these sessions and to access the recordings as much as you'd like. It really is a matter of what feels comfortable for you and what your circumstances are. So appreciation in advance for anything that you are able to give us if that's the case for you. And the money is split 50-50 with Kyra Jewel as well. So also what you give will go towards supporting her. So that's all I need to say about that. I'm going to take myself off and hand over to Kyra Jewel for today's session.
Thank you so much, Caroline, and really good to be with everybody again after a week away. I'm very glad that Martin is well enough now that we can pass the baton back and forth. So, welcome to us all. Today, I'm going to speak about a teaching that I find quite helpful in encountering difficult times or challenging, uncertain times. And it's on the 8 worldly winds. And it's also in response to someone's question when we opened it up for what topics you all would like to cover. Someone wrote a question about reactivity and how to practice receiving whatever arises without the need to change or fix it. So I was inspired by that question to look at these 8 worldly winds, because they help us to cultivate a vast presence in the midst of the ups and downs of life, kind of stability and equanimity. So in Sri Lanka and in many countries across Asia, you'll find a common symbol in Buddhist temples of a wheel that has 8 spokes and with a hole in the center, which is the axle of the wheel, right? For the wheel to turn in the cart. And originally I had learned that this symbol was the 8 spokes were for the eightfold path. And the wheel was the Dharma being set in motion, the teachings of the Buddha. And then here in Sri Lanka, I was offered another or a new explanation with this symbol, and it's a slightly different one here, where the spokes actually come out of the wheel. So they're popping out. So I'm not sure if it's meant to be a wheel or something else. Anyway, in this case, I was told that the 8 spokes represent the 8 worldly winds, these winds that are 4 pairs of opposites. So there's pleasure and pain. That's the first pair of opposites. There is gain and loss. There's praise and blame. And there's fame and disrepute. So all the ways that the winds of life blow on us and bring us fortune and then misfortune. So this wheel, this symbol, it's always turning. Yeah. It never stops. So we can't get comfortable with either the joys of pleasure and gain, but we also shouldn't identify with the misfortunes that come our way and think that they define our whole life, because they're changing also. So pretty soon, whatever state we're in, whether it's misfortune or fortune, things are going to change, and we'll find ourselves in some situation with different circumstances. So in times of transition, in times of difficulty, it can help us to accept that all of us experience the vicissitudes of life, and fortune comes to everyone, as does misfortune. And this isn't to sort of plaster over the fact that real social injustice and inequality exists, and we want to be attentive to that and work to end that as part of our spiritual practice. So certainly it's true that certain groups, certain genders, certain kinds of identity are privileged over others. Skin colors and nationalities and languages and certain abilities. So it's not to say that these things don't exist and have a real impact. But when we have a sense of how these winds play in our own life, we can reduce the reactivity we have to the ups and downs of our life. So what's good to realize with the way these winds blow is that we can have some influence over our affairs, and we can choose to act skillfully or unskillfully. But despite that, the 8 winds, they're not personal. They tend to come and go in every person's life. So they're not always related to, what we deserve. Okay? So we don't always experience blame or loss or pain because we've done something wrong or deserving of this misfortune, right? So adversities befall most of us in some way, even if our actions are very wholesome and full of kindness. If you think of spiritual teachers with a heart full of love and compassion like the Buddha or Jesus or many others throughout history, they've been misunderstood, they've been hated for their teachings. And then recent peacemakers like Gandhi, Martin Luther King were assassinated for their nonviolent ways. And in the same way, when pleasure or gain or fame or praise come our way, we also want to remember that these aren't personal. They're not, necessarily things that we have, done things to deserve. So they sometimes are a reflection of the skill, the commitment, the goodness we manifest in our lives. But they can also be forces that blow on us as they do on other people that are unrelated to our actions. And if we get possessive of them, if we hang on to them as who we are, who we want to be, then we're going to get rope burn when inevitably they move on. So we'll suffer if we think that we can control these winds. I mean, that's why that word is so poetic. They are winds. You can't keep them. You can't control them. They just blow, right? And the wheel is going to keep turning no matter what we do or how we live our lives. And it's the hole at the center of the wheel that is the key in this teaching, because that hole is empty. From the center, we can see all the 8 worldly winds without being caught up in them. And that center is a reminder of our own emptiness. This gives us the ability to see ourselves as more than these 8 worldly winds that come and go in our lives. So if we over-identify with the 8 worldly winds, and if we're dependent on other people's praise or opinions about us to be happy, then our happiness will be insecure and unreliable. But if our happiness is based on our own compassion and love for others and for ourselves, this allows us to be forgiving of our mistakes and confident in our progress on the path, then our happiness is solid and reliable. So this non-reliance on an external source of approval, floating on the 8 worldly winds, brings us into our center, to this place of stillness and quiet that leads us to an awareness of egolessness, of not being caught in a self-identity. So impermanence is a fundamental characteristic of existence, like these 8 worldly winds, constantly changing, blowing through our lives. And another fundamental characteristic of existence in Buddhism is a non-separate self, not having a self that can be separated and defended against. It's also called egolessness. And that's what that hole in the wheel represents. It helps us to touch this nature of emptiness that we each have. So if we can understand and live from this insight, it's very freeing, it's very empowering. It gives us a kind of secret weapon when we move through times of adversity and change. So no separate self means we're empty of a separate self, but full of everything else. So we're made up of all those who have influenced us and helped shape us in some way. Our parents, teachers, friends, the food we've eaten, the books we've read, sunlight, water, air. We can't exist by ourselves alone. We can only exist because of all of these other elements that have come to make up who we are. So with this insight, we we won't chase after pleasure or fame, nor fear pain or disrepute, blame, because we know we're larger than these forces and they can't define us. And this is a kind of non-fear when we have this insight. And that's what gives people courage to make big sacrifices and take huge risks, knowing that they're acting on behalf of the whole and that their actions will still have an impact, even if, those people in their own individual experience might not be there to see the results of their actions. So there's a Brazilian theologian named Ruben Alves who says, we must live by the love of what we will never see. Right? So we can think of so many courageous people who have acted on behalf of something larger with this understanding, right? This non-fear. So one other way to understand this experience of coming into the empty hole in the wheel is that of waves and water. And we may have spoken about this in one of the sessions previously. So on one level, a wave can be characterized as fast or slow, big or small, high or low. But if a wave bends down and touches its true nature, which is water, it gets in touch with a part of itself that can't be characterized by those qualities. Up and down, coming and going, being born, being dying. Those don't apply to water. Water is beyond those conditions. And so the empty hole in the wheel points us back to our true nature, not as a wave whipped up by the 8 winds, the 8 worldly winds, but rather as water, vast and immense. So when we touch our nature as water, we can navigate transitions much more easily. We don't take things personally as much, and we're less afraid. So my teacher, Thich Nhat Hanh, Thai, when he turned 88, he had a massive stroke. And the physicians didn't expect him to make it. It was so serious. But he did. But one side of his body was paralyzed and he lost the ability to speak. So he became totally dependent on others to take care of all of his needs. And at first it was difficult, but now, from what I have heard of those who care for him, he seems to be very at peace with his situation, and he's able to communicate in different ways without words. I had a chance to visit him in Vietnam in 2019, and I experienced him as very deeply present and still very powerful as a teacher. So my interpretation of how I saw him and what I heard from others is that he's able to move through the world gracefully, with the 8 worldly winds of loss and pain, because he wasn't attached to this idea of a separate self who had to maintain control and keep everything together. So when we touch our nature as water, and when we get to this space of the emptiness in the hole of the wheel, we get a larger perspective. We're not just these small selves in these limited circumstances. We are much, much more. So as William Wordsworth Longfellow wrote, I am vast. I contain multitudes. So let's do a practice together now to explore this. So coming into your body, just feeling the contact between your body and what you're connected to. Finding a supportive posture. Really letting your body release its weight and feel the support of the earth. You can take a deep inhale and a long, slow exhale. Feel free to do that a few more times if you enjoyed that. Perhaps feeling the breath down in the belly. And then breathing normally. So rooting down into the earth for stability from the lower part of the body and reaching up toward the sky with the upper part of the body. It's really taking our place right where we are on this spot between heaven and earth. Allowing your whole body, your whole being to be, to rest. So bring to mind times in your life where you experienced gain, when things were going well. Just observing if these times lasted, if they remained unchanging, or did the wheel of the 8 worldly winds keep on turning? And what about times in your life when there was loss, when things were taken from you or left you? Did those times stay the same without changing, or did the wheel keep turning? Do either of those experiences of gain or loss really define you in any final, permanent way? And what about experiences of pleasure and pain? Thinking back into your life, times you experienced pleasure, times you experienced pain, maybe physically or emotionally. Were you able to control them? To make them stay or make them go? Were they really personal? Like, were they really about you? Were they yours? How much of these experiences really define you? Is it wise to attach to these experiences as you? My pleasure, my pain. This is who I am. What's your experience with these states? Does the wheel keep on turning? Does pleasure turn to pain and pain back to pleasure? Is it true that a life worth living is one where we pursue pleasure and try to avoid pain at any cost? Is that really what life is about? Is that really what we want? And now considering fame and disrepute. Can think of so many famous people who have become infamous through their actions, through their unskillfulness. Those who've lost their success and prestige. Or sometimes through no fault of their own, this happened to them. And then on the other side, there are so many people who were at one point in their lives considered criminals, maybe jailed, hated, And then they became presidents, global heroes like Nelson Mandela. Even Thai was considered a war criminal by the Vietnamese government until the 1990s. His picture was up in an exhibit on war criminals. Or Angela Davis in the United States. Fame and disrepute coming and going, the winds blowing this way and then that way. What's really true in any of that? And thinking of our own lives and the times when we were praised and the times when we were blamed. How do we hold these times with more spaciousness so that we maintain our balance? One way is to experience that whether people praise us or blame us, they're partly right, just partly right. So we can hold that lightly, those opinions, those judgments, maybe with a smile of equanimity. So now visualize yourself sitting in the center of the wheel of these 8 worldly winds, in that empty space where you can observe all of them blowing in and blowing out. And though the wheel turns and turns, the eye of the wheel is still. And that's where you are, in that stillness. Or if it's helpful, you can visualize yourself on the top of a mountain with a lot of perspective all around. From this vantage point, you observe the circumstances of your life, the losses and the gains, the pleasure and the pain. But you begin to get free from the attachment and aversion to these things. Just like on the top of a mountain, sometimes the weather rolls through the valley. It's raining down in the valley, but you can see that from the top of the mountain, but it's not affecting you there. It just rolls on through. It's temporary. Let yourself breathe with awareness as you just rest in the center of the wheel. Just jumping off of that tendency to try to, be on this exhausting hamster wheel trying to chase pleasure and run away from pain, just running and running endlessly. Now you can just rest at the center, opening up, just being here, not pursuing one thing or running away from another thing. Resting at ease. In spaciousness, in stillness. A state of wishlessness. Non-pursuit. Letting go. I invite you to explore this further by visualizing yourself as a wave on the ocean. You're moving quickly and noticing how other waves around you are moving more slowly. And maybe there's a feeling of being proud or gleeful because you can go so fast. But then a huge wave comes by, dwarfing you, and makes you feel small and insignificant. So now you are open to resting into the embrace of the ocean. And you touch the truth of your nature as water. You let go of your wave form and go beneath the surface of the water, sinking down, 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 merging with the whole ocean. Fast. Here in this experience, there's no fast or slow, big or small. There's just water, which is the same substance that makes up the waves that were slower than you and the wave that was bigger and faster than you. But wait a second, there's no more you as a wave because now you're water. There's no comparison anymore. There's no separation. So let yourself enjoy being immense, being vast, being empty of a separate self, contented to contain multitudes. For some minutes in silence, just opening to your reality as the vast ocean. I cannot add more days to my life, but only more life to each day. I cannot add more days to my life, but only more life to each day. Lie die da die, la da die die da die, la da die die da die die da die. Lie die da die, la da die die da die, la da die die da die die da die. Slowly bringing your attention back. You can begin to bring movement into your body, gently stretching if that's good for you, and opening your eyes as you're ready. And you're welcome to share anything in the chat that you'd like to share, and also to come on if you have a question. You can come on screen with me. Be happy to see you, or you can ask a question in the Ask a Question area. It was nice to swim with you all in the great ocean of life. So, just so everyone knows, on the same page where it says Sangha Live Daily, you can see the recordings of all of the previous sessions, including today's, will be under the week of June 1st to the 5th, so you can always go back to it. And then there's a question I'm seeing from, oh yeah, so Caroline just put the link in the chat for how you can see the recordings. That's for you, Midge. So this is from Lynn, writes, how do the 8 worldly winds sit with the idea of karma? And just requesting everyone to put your questions in the Ask a Question area, because if you write them in the chat, I will likely miss them. If it starts to get very active, then it goes up quicker than I can catch what everyone's writing. So, the teaching on karma is a pretty deep teaching, and I haven't understood all of it. I'm still learning about it, but basically it comes down to cause and effect. And when we do certain things, that produces certain consequences. So in the Dhammapada, it talks about, just as the cart follows the horse that's pulling it, right? So if we do certain actions, certain consequences are going to follow. And also it uses the image of a shadow, like a shadow that follows us around when the sun is out. So we can't avoid the consequences of our actions. And the thing about karma is that there are many consequences. I mean, there are many conditions that bring about particular results. Some are things we contribute to, but some are not. So with the 8 worldly winds, sometimes we do things and we do wholesome things, but we encounter misfortune. We've seen that in many cases. There's many people who are experiencing injustice, oppression, and that's not because of any action that they did. It's because of unjust systems that exist, right? So there are many conditions that bring about certain ripening of karma. Some we have influence over, some we don't, in terms of our own personal contribution to that action. So we want to live in a way that where we make the best, the most wholesome choices we can, so that beautiful consequences will result. And, with these 8 worldly winds, we know that, that's impermanent, and we don't get to control how our life unfolds. But certainly, wholesome actions are a kind of protection. They are a kind of, they're not a guarantee, but they are definitely setting ourselves on a particular course, and deciding to come, to practice on a spiritual path, to commit to developing our minds, definitely leads to wholesome fruit, whether we are able to realize all of it, right now, or whether it's something that the fruit will come to us later. And one thing I'd say too about the worldly winds is that sometimes adversity is a real gift, right? If we think about the hardships we've been through in our own lives, how some of them have maybe really helped us to grow and to become more skillful and to transform things that, we're glad that we now have transformed. So once we commit to a path, we're going to meet those 8 worldly winds. We're going to meet all sorts of difficulties. And some of those difficulties are going to help us actually go deeper and become stronger on that path. So there's no, there doesn't need to be judgment about any of the 8 worldly winds, or, we don't need to cast them in this light of this shouldn't be happening, right? Thanks for the question. Looks like Rosie wants to come on. Would you like to come on and ask a question, Rosie? Go ahead. Hi.
Hello. Strange. So I had a question. I really resonated with what you were saying about just this movement between seeing how, one moment people are praising us, the next moment we feel like we've done something really wrong, and also this sort of movement between, sometimes experience is very pleasurable and lovely, and other times it can be really, really difficult. And just to sort of notice that movement is really helpful. But I've been noticing, particularly during this period of sort of lockdown, that it almost feels like, the good experiences everything feels heightened. So like, the lows feel lower and the highs feel higher. And I noticed that there is really a tendency to identify with either experience. And then when I move through to something else, particularly if I'm moving from a very difficult emotional landscape to something, actually I feel fine again now, is to kind of identify more with the good stuff. It's like, this is the real me now. Phew, I'm back to normal. And kind of to sort of push away the yucky, more difficult aspects of experience or myself. And I just wonder about how to, embrace both without over-identifying, I suppose.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So you go, well, neither is really me, but without sort of pushing away or Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It's a great question. Thank you. And I just want to appreciate the attentiveness that you're showing in being able to track that movement of the mind when you do come back to a more balanced or positive or wholesome state, that you identify more with that, oh, this is me. Now I'm back. That was just like
Well, I prefer that me.
Exactly. It's so good to see that, right? That there's a valuation of, oh, no, this is who I want to be, not this, right? And that's so human. It's what, I could totally relate to that, and it's also, what we're taught is to reject the parts of ourselves that other people don't like, that we don't like, that cause pain. But there's so much to learn from all of those states. And mindfulness, the thing I really like about mindfulness is mindfulness doesn't have a preference what it pays attention to. Mindfulness will be curious and interested and, delighted to pay attention to whatever is there. So maybe, when you're in those places that are, more of the unpleasant, the painful, really sharpening mindfulness to notice, well, how am I feeling? What is this experience? Is this, like a low mood? Okay, what's the low mood like? Is it, can I feel it anywhere in my body? What color would I give it? Can you still hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm seeing a frozen screen, but okay. Oh, there we go. But is it changing? Is this experience of a low mood, does it shift? And because if we can get curious about it, we actually, to me, this is a paradox, but the more we can get close to it and become intimate with it, the less we are pulled into identifying with it. So, and you could try that with the pleasurable states also. When you feel like, oh, now I'm back to being me. What does that feel like? Where do I feel that in my body? Is that shifting and changing within the experience of pleasure? Is there, a high or a low? Is there are there peaks and valleys? Are there, this feeling of wanting to protect it maybe and make it last? So what's the original experience? And then what are the layers of experience or reactivity that comes on after? So first is the experience, I'm doing okay now, I'm better. That's a mindful awareness. And then layered on that is, and this is me. So noticing already the different things that we do with our, how we relate to the original experience. So you can do that in both cases. And I think it's the common movement of mindfulness, or just the energy of mindfulness, that helps us not to be attached or aversive, whichever one it is. It's the same quality that you're bringing to both. So that's the truer you than either of those two experiences.
Yeah, thank you. And I think, because what I've noticed is that when when I'm feeling in a good space, it can almost feel like I go, oh yeah, what happened to that really awful space I was in yesterday? It's like I'm kind of betraying that person a little bit by just sort of going, well, you can just, that wasn't really, should I, it was almost a feeling like, should I be kind of, I didn't really explore that because it was so painful, but I'm quite happy to explore this really lovely, joyful space that I'm in, so thank you.
Yeah, thank you. It's really interesting exploration. Keep exploring. Tell us what you find out.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Rosie. Yeah, your question helped a lot of people, Rosie. It's good to see other people. So I'll read Laura's question. I really struggle to feel at one with all the other waves. In the times we are living in, where there are such immense divides created by skin color, it makes me feel separated by pain. I don't know how to emerge freely when my skin is white and my life has enabled me to be a bigger wave than others so many times over. Thank you, Laura, for this question. So the experience of, white skin privilege, it's really important. It needs to be acknowledged, and it is something that we want to spend time with and understand and come to know, because it doesn't need to be an experience that separates us from others, but it's understandable that that's how it's experienced, because the differences in privilege are so vast and there's so much suffering because of that. So it can be painful as we see what's happening in our world. We see the violence and the hatred being played out along the lines of skin color. And that's not how maybe we feel personally, but we're beneficiaries of it in some way. We're connected to it in some way, and that's very painful to see that. So there's two levels we have to look at here. On the level of the historical level, which is the level of waves that are high and low and white and non-white, we can use that white skin privilege on behalf of those who don't have it. So that's a way to work in solidarity and to feel our connection. Because you have a kind of speed because of your white skin that other differently skinned peoples don't have. That kind of speed. They can't go at that certain rate, but you can help them. You can do things to make it less unequal, to make it more to share. You can support causes that work to end racial discrimination. You can buy at businesses that are run by Black people, brown people, Asian, all skinned people, different colored people. There's a great Medium article actually called 75 Things White People Can Do to Work Against Racism. It was from 2018, but it has, it's just a growing list of things. It's written for people in the US, but I imagine there's things that are relevant for everyone. And not just white people, but, all people. There are actions we can take to lessen the pain of racial injustice. So that's the historical level. And then there's the ultimate level, which is the level of water, where all these waves are of the same nature. And I think the deeper we get in touch with our particularity as a wave, the more we'll get in touch with our true nature as water. So it's not by abandoning, like, oh, I don't want to be white, or I don't want to, have this history, this identity, but it's actually by really deeply claiming, going back to really understand your ancestors and the history and how white supremacy came about, and how, what laws, what ways of thinking, what spiritual, religious beliefs crystallized it, made it stronger. But go back and claim your own ancestry, your white heritage, to help you to see that you're grounded in a history, in a historical context that allowed this to come about. Because I think that's what will help us, each of us, to come into a deeper understanding of how this is all working within a larger system. It's not about that police officer or, that, one racist person. It's a whole system that has valued some humans over others and convinced us that some humans are not actually humans. So there's a lot more to share about all that, but I'm looking at the time and thinking we should probably close. Excuse me. So I see there's a lot of other questions that people wanted to have answered. Maybe we can pick up some of the questions tomorrow. I think there's just one from Faith. We'll try to do this one tomorrow. So thank you all for your practice and your willingness to explore, stretching our idea of who we are, making it bigger. And I look forward to seeing you again tomorrow. Take care.